Board games is what I'm talking about. Board games, I'm not gonna shout. I am starting off this streaming with a little bit of singing. And over there, below me, is HL Truslove, known as Harley. And over there, we've got... Sorry, Scott, I'm struggling to rhyme your name. We have not got Peter, but we have got Scott. We are going to talk about game books today. Game books aren't board games, but are something that you play. We'll talk about ownership of narrative in them. We'll talk about why they are a gem, just a tiny bit. It's mainly about the ownership of narrative. Game books, it's what we're talking about. Ownership of narrative in game books. I'm not going to shout. Hello and good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. I am Bez. This is Bezzy Beats and Board Game Blether, episode 362. I am streaming every day at 10 a.m. UK time for the next 38 days. And today I've got Peter, who will hopefully be coming up in a wee bit, Harley, who is down there, and Scott, and we're talking about ownership of narrative, kind of the authors, like the fact that the author wrote this thing, but then the players make the choices, and is the resulting story down to the players? Is it down to the author? And where does the ownership lie? How can we make people feel some more agency? And yeah. Hello, Rob. It's lovely to have you here. And if this sounds interesting, then stick around. As always, we are going to have, 10, 20 minutes of regular features before we get stuck into the main topic. And hello, Nicholas. It is lovely to see you as well. So let's start off with some recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights, recent highlights. So in the comments, if you are willing to share any recent highlights, please do so. And let's share the joy, or if you have something that's not so much of a joy, but you're a regular and you need to get something off your chest, you can. And yeah, Scott, let's go clockwise as always. Are you ready to tell us one of your recent highlights?
Well, I'm not sure if it's a highlight or a low light. I got a message yesterday from one of your Saturday guests. Maybe you can guess which one. Okay. I believe it was 2 days ago. You were.
Yes. And then?
Well, it was.
Are you willing to share any more, or just vague booking?
It was a Mr. Hopwood who contacted me.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you were asking me to actually guess. I thought you were kind of saying, oh, I don't want to quite say which one, but anyway, okay. Andy Hopwood, yes, of course.
No, I've got to say that it's Andy, because I did say it might be a low light, so my ambiguity about whether it was a pleasant experience or not has to be directed towards Andy, I think.
What?
The drama.
Wow. Why so? Okay, I'm not sure what to make of this vague.
Andy did threaten to join us this morning just because I'm on the show, probably to tell a joke about me or something like that.
So I am assuming that when you say it's a low light, it's just because you know Andy quite well and you are being entirely facetious.
Yes.
Okay, I am glad to hear that, Scott.
But no, it was a highlight.
Okay, yes, Andy is a lovely person from the same city. Yes, it is a city. I was going to say village, but then, yeah, if Birmingham isn't a city, then what's his kind of thing? I mean, yeah, then I guess we'd say, okay, only capital cities count as cities, which, hey, let's not go down that road. But Andy is a lovely person, and yes, shouts out to Andy Hopwood for sure. Harley, what is one of your recent things that has happened?
I got a new tattoo.
Ooh, let me make you bigger.
It's a little rat. Sorry, I've got a light coming right in from that side. Let me see if I can move my body. There we go.
Nice.
It's a rat.
That's beautifully coloured.
Yes, I have a regular artist who I go to. She did my frog as well.
Oh, nice.
And I have a hedgehog on my shoulder, but I'm not going to whip that one out because I've got too many layers on this morning. But yeah, I got that done last Thursday, and it's still peeling. So maybe I shouldn't have showed it off with such enthusiasm. Just bits of flakes, just snow onto my
looks
desk.
Great.
Yeah, so that's my exciting thing.
Well, that is very exciting. And Rob, based on me almost calling Birmingham a town, says, I went to the tiny, quaint village of Oxford on Saturday for the first time in well over a year. It was weird.
Yeah, definitely more of a hamlet.
My highlights, I'm going to say, is playing Keyforge yesterday with a lovely friend. And we had, here, this is one of the people that I'm pretty much living with. And yeah, Keyforge, I had a couple of decks. I bought one just before a tournament and played. It was a very friendly tournament. It was at Bastion. Enjoyed the game. I played maybe 6 games or 7 games with this one deck, and I was like, yeah, this is a good game. Well done, Richard Garfield. As I would expect, frankly, given, the things that person's come up with in the past. And then bought a few more decks, never actually got to play them because it was like, oh, I need the tokens. What do I substitute for the tokens? Yes, I could go to another box. Yes, I could get other things, but I don't want to hassle. And then yesterday, I think it was just a few days ago, from Big to Cock, Board Game Trading and Chats UK, I got a starter set of one of the recent expansions. And so it has all the tokens. It has, a quick starts guide, which does a great job of getting you in. And we spent a couple of hours playing that, and it was great fun. And yeah, I'm looking forward to playing that more. Now, in the comments, we've got a question for Harley. Is there any significance for the choice of animals?
I really wish I could say there was, but no, frogs are my favourite animals, which is why this was my first animal. And the hedgehog was to cover up another tattoo, which had my old pronouns on it, which I wasn't so hot on anymore. And I asked the tattooist, and she said the best way I could cover that is maybe like a hedgehog rolling in like brambles and things. So I thought, okay, that sounds good, and it's pretty decent. Like, I say it's pretty decent. It's a very good cover up, and it's a very good tattoo. She's a very good artist. And the rat, the artist just does very cute rats. And so I thought I would quite like one, and so she did. But it's this one. The rat is sitting in a sunflower because that was my granddad's favourite flower, and he passed away last year. So, and this other one is named after my other granddad, who also passed away last year.
Go to the funeral, may I ask?
Yeah. It was in December, so a little bit not dodgy, but it was just before the second lockdown happened. So. Third lockdown happened, so yeah.
Well, I'm glad you were at least able to, get. Yeah, I don't know whether to call it closure, but at least you were able to attend. Yeah. I hope that. And Rob says, can't argue with logic like that, and great that the animals are linked to memories. Yeah. And Nicholas in the comments just offering everyone energy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, fellow Groblin.
So, unless anyone has any other recent highlights that they wish to mention, I guess, I might mention this game that I did play quite a bit of on stream yesterday, which is called Monster Loves You, which is kind of like a choose your own narrative digital game because there are 5 attributes which go up and down, and they do it so a bit more frequently Dan might be appropriate if you are having to keep track of it yourself. But Monster loves you. It's very friendly. You never, die or anything. Yes, you go to adolescence and then you go past adulthood, and if you don't get enough respect, then you might be sent back to the primordial ooze from which all monsters come, apparently. But if you don't, then you might become an elder. But the first time I played it, I tried really hard to get all the respect, and then to have monsters loving humans and humans loving monsters, and then they all came together in a massive unity, and then it was like a new world of monsters and humans living in unity, which is just lovely. And then I played it, I think, 2.5 more times. The half it still kind of paused, and I was like, yeah, I've spent enough time playing video games for today. I am going to,
Lies.
head off, walk around.
Impossible.
And yeah. But that is my other recent highlight. If anyone we've got one more. Shout out to Rob Harper in chat, giving Nicholas tons of very helpful feedback on the rules draft recently. Definitely a highlight to get that sort of support. 100%. So let's move on to the questionably quick questions. So where are you? What time is it? So let's start with Harley. Go clockwise.
As always, I'm in my bedroom. You can see my wonderful wardrobe back there. That's actually my partner's one. You can see all the beer labels that he's collected. It is, what's the time? Oh, I've got my watch on upside down. That doesn't help, does it? It is about 10 past 10 where I am, as I imagine it probably is for you too as well.
Yes, because we are in the same country, Scott.
We are in the same country.
I'm also in my bedroom. I had a bit of an incident last night. There was this noise coming from somewhere, like a beeping noise, like a sort of, when a fire alarm battery is sort of running down. So eventually I figured out, I think it's from the neighbour's flat. So I had to change bedrooms. Fortunately, I've got a second bedroom. I still heard it there, but I managed to get to sleep.
Has it stopped now? Is it gone?
It was still here about half an hour ago, but it seems to have gone off. So I think they've dealt with it now.
Touch wood.
But anyway, it's 10:13 now, and I'm in the village of Birmingham, the second largest village in England.
And I am in the hamlet known as London, the one of the largest hamlets in the world. I am, of course, being facetious, and it is 10:13 as well here. Now, if anyone wants to get their questionably quick questions in, please do so within the next minute. Otherwise, I am going to ask you, what is the last thing you read on paper? Harley.
The highway code. I'm learning to drive. I've just had my 3rd driving lesson, so I've been picking up the highway code when I have a free 5 minutes and just reading like 3 rules at a time. It's not very exciting. Well, I mean, it's exciting in the way that, wow, driving, but also it's not like got an extremely exciting narrative, I'm going to be honest with you. The protagonist isn't very moving of the highway code.
But don't you feel like you can identify with the protagonist? Like, the protagonist has all the same laws and all the same regulations apply to them as you.
Choose your own adventure highway code. So you go left or right. Right, you run into a wall. Game over.
I think I had a book that I recycled because it was a driving theory test from 2005. And I was thinking, you know what? I asked a friend if they would like it, and then we're like, no. And it's probably not worth giving to a charity shop. 15 years out of date. This just needs to be recycled. Sad as it might be to recycle books, some books just have a shelf life.
Yeah, I think mine was like 2019 or something, so it's quite recent.
That's good.
But it's
Better
good they're
than
updating it. Keep updated on the laws of the road.
Oh yeah. And Scott, what's the last thing that you actually read on old-fashioned paper?
I'm reading a couple of books at the moment. So on your recommendation, Bez, I bought and I'm reading Understanding Comics by Scott
McCloud.
McCloud, yeah, which is excellent. I'm about halfway through. It's a work of genius. I agree with your assessment there. And I'm, of course, reading a game book as well at the moment. I've just started this one, which is the third in a trilogy. I haven't read the other two, but
Solar War by Samuel
Isaacson. It's part of a book club for a game book club. So this is the book of the month. And I bought some from the author, so he signed it for me.
Ooh, nice. Very nice.
So it's good so far. I'm enjoying it. It's more interesting than the highway code, certainly.
I would hope so, but given that one has a practical purpose beyond mere entertainment. Not that entertainment is invalid by any means. I don't think I read any of my words that I'd written myself today. And I guess technically right now the last thing that I read was the thing that I was writing, because occasionally I glance down and I read it as I write it. But before that, I want to say it might have actually been the rules to Keyforge yesterday afternoon, which means that I did not read anything on paper all of the evening, which seems odd to say. Like, I'm thinking surely there must be something that I read, like some box. I mean, I look to my side and I just glance and I can't help but read the titles of all these games that are on the site. So, but certainly the last one that I'm conscious of is Keyforge. I see no one has a brilliant thing, so I mean, no one has a questionably quick question, so let's move on to the brilliant thing and let's talk about words. Words and communication. They're brilliant. I mean, you can't express yourself. Well, you can express yourself without them, with dance or noises or facial expressions or all sorts of things, but words give a degree of clarity. And when you have a word for something, it's easier to talk about it, which is, I think, why Isaac Shalev and Jeff Engelstein did such a great job with that building blocks of tabletop game design, where they're saying, hey, some of these aspects of tabletop game design don't have words. Let's give them words. And you know, Scott McCloud talking about the formalists and the classicists, even though we might disagree with these words, with our words, we can give definition, and we can, once we have a definition for something, we can then discuss that in greater detail. I think words are just brilliant. Scott, do you have anything more to say about words?
Of course, words are brilliant. I was trying to think of my favorite word, but I would take ages to think of that. What I find interesting about words is, because I know other languages, particularly Hungarian, it's interesting that there are certain words in some languages which you just can't translate. So the words, some words just say so much to you, which you, in another language, you have to express that word or that concept with a whole sentence or even a paragraph. So I find that fascinating that,
like in 4C, the notion of Torofi, the notion of sorts of, it's not exactly false or insincere generosity, but it's kind of the notion that you have to refuse something. You can't just accept a gift straight away. You have to refuse it. But refusing it isn't saying, oh, I don't value this gift. It's almost like, oh, and I guess there is a degree of insincerity to it, to say, oh, I can't possibly indulge in this thing. How could I possibly deserve this? And then it's, oh no, you're the most amazing person. Here, have this. And then you say, oh no, I can't possibly. And you say, oh, it's for you. You must have it. And then you say, oh, but. And then even when you go into a restaurant, like if you ask how much is it, they will ask in the restaurant, oh, Gobel Nadore, which means, oh, I couldn't possibly ask you to pay for it. It's my pleasure to serve you. That's literally what it means. And it's such an entrenched part of it that it's seen as a subversion when in a comedy someone says, oh, well, the person said gobernador, so I just didn't pay. And then that's like a joke because it goes, people don't think about it. That's entrenched into the culture. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about, Scott, that maybe even, expresses culture as well?
I thought one of my favorite words in Hungarian, just because of the way it sounds, it's a very common word, so lots of people learn it as their first word in Hungarian. It's egészségedre, which it's used for, the English equivalent would be cheers or to your health. So in Hungarian, it means literally to your health. But the way health in Hungarian is oneness. So it's egészség, so it's the state of being whole. So literally, you could say it's to your state of being whole or complete. But it sounds so fun, egészségedre.
Yeah, I get that. And yeah, sure, I agree with Nicholas that it's not literally untranslatable. You can translate anything given enough words, but it's just, it captures this whole, all these emotions. That's, as you say, Scott, you need to have yeah. And hello, Maya, it's lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us. Harley, we're talking about words. Why are words brilliant?
Well, yeah, I mean, I love words. I did 2 degrees in writing and English and all that jazz. So, I mean, it would be a bit wild if I just went, nah, I'm not actually that into language, to be honest with you. It kind of sucks. But no, I think the idea of, especially translating from one language to another, is that so much can be lost, because like my partner reads a lot of philosophy books because that's what he did his degree in. And we were sort of talking about how, you've not read the original if you've read a translation. What you've read is you've read one translator's version of what was being said, especially with some heavier concepts. A translator might go, oh, it's easier to put it this way, but that may not be what the person originally intended for it to mean. So everyone should just learn as many languages as they can. That's where I fall on that. And we should start teaching languages earlier in England. Because I only started doing my second language at 11 years old, and that's too old, I think.
That's a fair point, and I think that for sure I've got a couple of nibblings who are trilingual, English, German, and Farsi, because one parent speaks German, one parent speaks Farsi, admittedly not as well as someone who might have grown up in Iran, and both of them speak English and used to live in London, just 20 miles that way.
Out the hamlet.
Yeah, the other side of this, a hamlet that's 20 miles from one side to the other. Anyway, in all sincerity, firstly, good morning, Alex. It is lovely to see you. And Nicholas says, that's why I love annotated translations for languages I don't speak, which are almost all of them. And yeah, like Kusagi Ojimbo, for example, great comic. Sometimes it says, oh, they will use original Japanese words because it kind of has a bit of connotations, and it's kind of simpler to say this is what that word means with a little asterisk in the first panel that it's brought up, and then just use that original word. It helps entrench you into the mood of that thing.
It's like in some manga, it's like they'll put a joke and then they'll put a little thing that'll be like, this is funnier in Japanese. And you're like, yeah, okay, fair enough.
So let's get on with the main topic. I realize that I probably should get better at doing some sort of vague introduction of these people. I have had both of them on their own show before, but just in case you haven't heard of them before, Harley, you are here because you wrote Alba, basically, and you've written a game book. And yeah, is there anything that you want to say about yourself quickly?
I mean, I think everyone probably knows everything by now. that I've got going on. Yes, I wrote a very large game book that went on Kickstarter at the beginning of this year. And one day I'll write something else so that I'm not just stuck saying I wrote Alba, because everyone knows that at this point.
And Scott, I originally had you on because, you know, you're just a big fan of game books, and it was lovely to chat about them with you. And now you've written your own, and also we know each other from Birmingham Board Game Bash. Is there anything else that you would like to say about yourself that is nothing to do with me?
I have an idea for my second micro game book, so I'm not going to give any spoilers. So even the title is going to be a bit of a spoiler. So I won't mention it just yet.
Okay, and if you've never watched this show before, somehow you've managed to find yourself to this tiny corner of the internet, firstly, thank you for joining in. I love making games. I'm best known for Yogi, and I also made these two things, which are the L deck, and they've got terrible box size. I'm not happy with them. Kitty Cataclysm, L deck, and Yogi, and I love games, and I stream every day currently. But when I get to episode 400, I'll have a wee break. So that is us, and feel free to comment, ask questions from Like Follow. We will get a bit more on topic now, and Peter might join us or might not. And for now, we are just chatting about ownership of narrative in game books with Harley and Scott. And yes, let's chat all about that. What does ownership of narrative mean to you, Harley? Oh, and firstly, oh my gosh, I just want to give a quick shout out to Andy Hopwood. It is lovely to hear. I'm loving that subtitles are making crazy alterations to everything you are saying about losing stuff in translations. Apparently there's Facebook subtitles which are terrible. And Runa, it's lovely to see you as well, and enjoy your time in the garden, and thank you for choosing us to listen to. So, ownership of narrative, game books. Harley, can you help us define some of these terms?
Yeah, well, I used to, when I was doing my degree, I used to be very into the idea of death of the author, until I wrote a book. And then I was like, it's a tricky one though, especially because, well, game books are not like a traditional book where you're writing, the author is writing a narrative, which which can be, you know, quite personal to them, or is, you know, not designed to be shared. I mean, obviously readers are going to read it, but it can be a thing that's very close and personal to you. Whereas a game book is literally like, I am giving this to you, the reader, and this is now your journey, your story. It's literally designed to, I address you in its pages. I talk to you. It is you who is the main character. So I think it's quite a difficult one. At what point do you step back as the author and say, you know, this is now yours, reader?
And
you know,
the concept of death of the author, for those of us who haven't had an English degree, I mean, I assume it is, I understand the word death of the author, and I can sort of intuit what you mean by that, but is there a particular specific meaning to that phrase?
Yeah, so it's kind of like, as soon as the author stopped writing and it gives it over to the reader, their intentions don't matter anymore. It's the sort of meaning of the text, the importance of the text is solely from what the reader will glean from it. So it doesn't matter if I wrote a poem saying this is about caterpillars. If someone decides this is a metaphor for being trans, then that's what it is at that point. If that's what they believe, although it probably will be a metaphor for being trans, knowing the kind of poetry I write.
So
just being honest.
So what made you disagree with that? Is it that you believe that you want to keep telling people about your intentions behind Alba? Like, if someone misunderstood Alba, would you want to step in and think, hey, no, that's not what I mean?
Well, yeah, but at the same time, if that's what they think it means, then it shouldn't be up to me to invalidate that just because I wrote it. Their reading of it should be just as valid as what I meant when I wrote it. But then again, I mean, once again, Alba isn't like some kind of big philosophical text. Gosh, cannot speak this morning. Very sorry. It's a game book about exploring a post-apocalyptic world. So hopefully, Thread shouldn't get too crossed.
Yeah, it feels kind of very young adult in its tone.
Yeah. It's so I would hope that we wouldn't get into huge discussions about what does it mean when you leave the ship. It means you left the ship. So I feel that maybe I'm overthinking this a bit, but look, if you read Alba and you get some sort of meaning in it that I didn't think of, live your truth. That's what it means now. I suppose I should say.
And there's this concept in board games that perception is reality. Like, if someone thinks that a board game is unbalanced, then that kind of matters more than whether it is imbalanced or not from a mathematical perspective. Like, if I've got a card that I believe is clearly the best card, even though maybe I'm completely wrong, and someone else could make a mathematical proof where actually, in that example where I played what I thought was clearly the best card, it would have been slightly better to play this other card. But because I think that whenever I've got this card, I should play it, that's going to influence the games. That's going to, because ultimately, whether it's a game book or whether it's a game that you're playing to win, and I know some game books you do wins, you know what I mean, like whether it's something you're playing for self-expression, whether it's something you play for the sake of strategy, it's all about the experience. It's all about whatever goes on in your mind. And so perception so much is reality.
I'd also like to say I massively, massively, massively simplified Death of the Author. So please don't come for me with my baby explanations.
No, we understand that we're not getting an entire year-long degree by listening to this show.
Well, then why am I here? It's like, can we expand that to Death of the Creator? What you were just saying, Bez, about cards and card games and things like that. Like, is it a death of the creator if you play a game the way it's not meant to be played? Sorry, your door just opened in my house. It was quite spooky.
And I think Maya's saying yes. I am feeling yes, for sure. Yeah, Death of the Creator seems like a good concept. I mean, once it is there, people can do what they want, says Maya, 100%. And for sure, there was a thread that I saw somewhere with someone being, people feel a sense of, oh, I can't do this house rule because I don't want to invalidate the game. Whatever you do is valid. Like, don't be gatekeeping yourself. Just make up house rules, even if you think, oh, I'm not a designer. Like, if you feel like you would prefer to play a game to 8 points rather than 10 points, or if you feel like you'd like to go on to the 11th point, try it. Just try it. And if you find that, oh, wow, that 11th point, that takes a lot more time than the 9th or the 10th point ever did, and then you decide to go back, Yeah, and Andy says, winning the game always comes second to the experience of playing. It's the difference between existing and living. Scott, do you have anything to say about the balance of agency and ownership of narrative?
I mean, I think just going back to the issue of more the game side, in game books, the classic, there are two different approaches with game books that have mechanics like Fighting Fantasy, has combat, for example. You can follow the rules as written in the book, but a lot of people ignore them because you might not like rolling dice, you might not like dying in combat, so you can just ignore the rules and play the book as purely as a narrative, not as a game. And with board games, it's interesting because I was talking with Andy about narrative in board games. I think some board games are very rules heavy, and like war games, for example, they're very rules heavy. And if the author or the designer of the game has created a set of rules which are designed to provide a good experience, but the players have a lot of agency, they have a lot of choices they can make at each point in the game, and the outcome of the game, there can be millions of different outcomes of the game. So you can have both, a structure provided by the designer and a lot of free agency in which the players actually decide what the game is. They generate the outcome of the game, they generate the experience to a large extent. The game books, so game books is they're both a narrative and a game, so they can go either way, I think. With an open world game book, the writer's creating a world for the player to explore. So I suppose in those, you want to give the player quite a lot of agency in terms of where they're going, where they're heading in terms of locations or geography. Whereas other game books, which may be more narrative, more linear, you have less agency as a player, so the narrative is perhaps more constrained. So there's maybe less player agency and less scope for the player to create their own story.
And, for those who haven't, like myself, had the pleasure of being given an advanced copy of Albad to read through, which I imagine is basically everyone watching, it's not like you start reading it and says, whoa, you can go literally anywhere, do literally anything. That's not it at all. It's just that at the end of each chapter, within each chapter, there's different sections, and in the sections you make with little choices, but each chapter will normally be about one location, and at the end of that location, you will have some other locations that are on your map, and you've basically got a larger number of things, and there's more possibilities to do things in a variety of orders, let's say. And Harley, you can correct me if I'm, misrepresenting something, but that's ultimately what I feel distinguishes this new format of open world adventure books through normal game books, because you get to do things out of order. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of things that are there's a narrative beginning and a narrative end, but the other bits you can just sort of do as you need. So,
and there's some sections where there's a location that you go, and then when you leave, you always cross off that location. You've been to that, and then sometimes you get to revisiting that location chapter, and yeah, it's up to you to. Sorry.
No.
Please
just
continue.
yeah, yes, it's definitely a lot more. Obviously, because taking away the idea of fighting fantasy books, if you don't want to roll a dice, you could just sort of not cheat, but just go to the most successful page and just keep going from there. Hopefully, it sort of discourages that, because there isn't really a bad outcome. So I don't know if that is a good or a bad thing, but
the fact that there's more valid possibilities, I wonder if the fact that, and a quick hello to Erin, good morning, and Xate, it is lovely to see you both, and I will catch up with the comments properly in just a minute. I feel like when you've got one true route, like in fighting fantasy Warlock of Firetop Mountain, or frankly any of the 50 whatever things that there were, it feels like any deviation from that isn't as valid. You are kind of exploring what the author determined was the one correct path to find the treasure for that Warlock of Firetop Mountain, because you need to find these 3 things to open up the chest at the end. Oh, you need to find your way to this. You've got a definite mission. You do it. It's not like, hey, I wander around and sometimes I'm a gibbering Greek, but that is actually, it's not just written with you die. It's written with a 2-page epilogue about how exactly you become a gibbering Greek, and in another entire chapter after that about you living life. And when I say chapter, I mean like another couple of pages after that about how you go back to the ship as a gibbering Greek, which is kind of sad, but it feels valid as a narrative in a way. Anyway, we've been skirting around the issue. I just want to say, what is this? I feel like we should define this. I feel it's worth acknowledging that in board games, there is a real... Yeah. Sorry, I'm struggling for words. Generated procedural complexity. You know what I mean? Like, can go... You've got these rules, but then they combine and then they make something more that you didn't even think could happen. And then in a collectible card game or in something like Keyforge, you've got these two cards and then they interact together because they're both happening together. And then there's a rules interaction that the author wouldn't even have imagined. And whereas with a game book, with writing, it feels like that's very much down to within the mind of the person. And so any authorship, any ownership is going to be what comes within them. I want to acknowledge, Alex says, I have written a lot of puzzles in my time. They got better when I started trying to make the puzzler feel clever, rather than showing them how clever I was. Allowing them ownership of the puzzle solving was the key. And Erin says, do you find yourself trying to write in a way that gives the reader more of a chance to interpret it how they like within their mind, even though the words might be the same, they play out differently within your own mind. What do you think to this, Scott?
It occurred to me earlier that the one type of text which is really or two types which are most open to interpretation are songs and poems. And because in poetry you're often trying to select words with multiple meanings, you're putting them in a sequence, but there are so many possible meanings or interpretations that the reader is really creating the narrative or the meaning themselves often. And even more so in songs, you can mishear lyrics and create your own words in the songs. So I think in game books, it partly depends on the format. I mean, there are poetry-based game books which are open to a lot more interpretation as to meaning, but you've still got basic choices with game books. You've always got the choice of go to paragraph whatever or this. So there's a certain amount of procedure there, but the meaning behind the words can be open to interpretation. It sort of depends on the form. Other game books, if each paragraph or each section is a whole page or 2 pages, then it becomes a little bit more like a novel. I guess what the reader is doing is it doesn't necessarily go chronologically, or you might not go through the whole text in one sitting. You might go through half the text, create your own version of the narrative in that way.
Harley, do you try to use metaphor and intentionally vague words at all to allow the reader more of a chance to interpret things?
Firstly, hello, Erin. Secondly, yeah, I think that not when I'm writing game books, really. When I'm doing poetry and things like that, definitely I leave things more open to interpretation. It reminds me of back when I was in my A levels many years ago. We were talking about my teacher was talking about how there is no wrong interpretation of a poem. And then we got to the point, and there was a poem we were reading, and it was about like a childhood relationship with their parents. And one of the girls in my class went, "Oh, I thought this poem was about a dog." And then my teacher was like, "Okay, so maybe there is some wrong interpretations of a poem." But no, I think it's a difficult one, because with an open world, with a writing an adventure book, it is sort of less about leaving an interpretation and more about leading the reader down a path, I suppose, because you can't. It's a bit hard to be sort of more vague when each section is going to end with, and then do you go left or right, sort of thing. A reader needs an informed explanation of what they might expect if they go left or right, sort of thing.
Ideally, you need, I guess, you can do very different things in game books. You can be very experimental. You could imagine a version of the Jabberwocky that was written in prose that you couldn't understand. Do you smudge the livid, or do you quell up the monking? I don't know. And then clearly I'm going to quell up the monking. And yeah, I just realized that sounds like I'm saying monk king, but I'd have to work on those words a bit better. That's just, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You could get very experimental, but for a normal game book, if you want to have that agency of choice, you want to make that an informed choice. So for that, you need to have clarity of prose, I guess.
I think especially if you were coming into a Jabberwocky game book, you would probably know what to expect. If I suddenly started going Jabberwocky halfway through Albert, people would probably go, what happened to this author? Did they have a bit of a breakdown halfway through? And the answer would be yes. But
oh my gosh, you know what? Oh my gosh, when it's too late now, I'm not asking you to rewrite it all. But during the moment where the main character has a breakdown, that's how it should have gone.
It's interesting. I'll write that down for my second book.
Yeah, like when your character had a breakdown, so like the clarity of the words reflects, and your understanding as a player represents the understanding or the tenuous grasp of the character on reality.
Can I just say, a Jabberwocky game book would also be sick, and someone should write it. Not necessarily me, but someone.
Okay, and Andy makes a really good point that maybe a poet isn't deliberately trying to allow wider interpretation. Sometimes maybe those metaphors are just because those metaphors have some emotional connotations and they evoke something even more purposefully. I would say that sometimes a song or poem is actually about communication, where the lyrics, the metaphor, the ostensibly vague words are actually trying to bring clarity to a subject, bring some real emotion. And let's be honest, sometimes it's just about having a nice tune and a nice beat. I mean, a lot of Beatles songs, I don't think they were trying to be particularly meaningful. Not saying that they weren't, wonderful lyricists and songwriters, they clearly were, but I think that a lot of them are just, hey, let's write a catchy tune. And yeah, Scott, do you have anything more to say on this?
I think with the Beatles, for example, John Lennon wrote "I'm the Walrus," which is essentially gibberish, because he was fed up of people interpreting Beatles songs, giving them meanings which they didn't have when they were written. So I think, there's a danger that you can give meaning where there isn't any, or any intention to provide any framework for meaning. But as you say, sometimes the writer of a poem or a song has a specific meaning or message to communicate. In that case, interpreting it in a different way, you lose that message, you lose the point of the song or the poem.
Yeah, I guess that's the kind of thing that it's about, that balance of communication and clarity and the agency, because it is a game book. And I always dislike the what the author meant discussion, says Maya. What is more important is what those words mean to us. and what could they mean to someone else. I kind of agree, but yeah, from the perspective of, was it a successful piece of art? Is art about provoking something in the viewer? Is art about communicating? Yeah, Alex says sometimes there's just a gun there. It's not always Chekhov's gun. And hello, River Dusty. My sister had the experience in school of having the poets in class when his poem was discussed. The class ended up in an argument between the teacher and the poet on what the poet meant in the poem. I mean, you can't argue about what the poet meant. That's not right. But you can argue about what the poem meant. I think that's a valid argument to have. Okay, let's go with a really quick question. What's the minimum number of sections needed to make it a game book? Could you have 3, and then you start off, and then you make a choice, and then you go to section B or C? I mean, that's kind of 3 sections, and like a million sections. I don't think there's ever been a book with more. Scott, you probably know what's the biggest number of sections ever, but like, what's the minimum number for a game book, Scott, in your opinion? Got reaction? Hot take. Harley, hot take.
Well, I mean, my micro game book
12.
was my micro game book was 40 sections, which I thought was really short, but there's a lot you can do with that. So yeah, you can. I guess what makes a game? If it's 3 sections, you have section 1. Do you go to section 2 or section 3? Is it a game then, or is it just a choice? So
how many choices make up a game?
Yes. Is it a game anyway if you're just making...
But what's your hot take? I've committed to the answer. I've committed to say 12. Hey, I put my neck out on the line here. I want you... This is why I'm getting you on. Come on. I'm pushing you.
I think you could go lower than 12. I think you could do 8.
So you think that 8 would feel like a game book? And Alex said, yep, exactly what I said. 3 opening with 1 choice, 2 resolutions, exactly. But the question is, does that feel like a game book to you? That's my question. Not just, is there a choice? And
2 choices does not a game book make.
You can go back. You can have going back to a choice that maybe you have a deviation. So you can do things where you have a recursion. Yeah, I could see a case for 8. Harley, what's your gut reaction? Do you think a bigger number? Are you thinking 40?
No, I feel like 8 is a good number for the very minimum. At least 8.
Okay.
But it depends how long those sections are, I suppose. Because Terminal had, you said 40, and they were sort of a sentence each. And that was a good, a confusing and immersive experience. So I think, yeah.
It does depend what you put in the sections. If you have some mechanics and you have a combat, you could have a whole battle in one section of a game book. So,
like you could, in theory, have the rules for a game in one of the sections.
Well, isn't a set of board game rules? That's like a one section game book.
Oh God, it's too deep.
Okay, let's.
Where's boys when you need it? That's the kind of book I need.
Can Maya, you can argue on the number 0, but you need to make an argument. And yeah, you can't. If you have 0, then it doesn't exist, surely.
If you have 0 choices, then a book is just a book. It's not a game book.
And how can you go negative? 1 hour, 1 life. Yep, I'm familiar with that. It's a great game. But that's not a game book. That's a video game. I feel like, anyway, I'm going to wait for Maya to type out the whole thing, and then we can come back to that. So, the other side of the question that I wanted to ask is, what's the minimum length of a section to make a choice feel like it's been worth making? If you go to a comic and then there's literally just, you punch and then it says ow and it says, okay, do you block? Or if it's not, I guess it's not just about the length, but it's also about the narrative impact of that choice, because each choice, you can't have a game book that, well, you could in theory have a hypothetical game book that was 400 sections that was just one fight, right? But that would be very difficult to imbue each separate choice with any real meaning. If we had, and I'm not, yeah, sure, you could go fancy and say, okay, this fights, it's battles against time and space, and then you have like a break in the battle to play chess, because you have a battle of, I'm talking about just a fisticuffs battle lasting about 5 minutes, and every second is like a different choice. That's not going to feel meaningful. That's going to feel, why did I even turn to this page? But is there any way to measure the amount of impact that a choice has to have? I mean, I feel for me, I have to, there is definitely a bit of work on the part of me as a reader. And there was a video game creator who talked about juiciness, which was the concept of low input to high output is high juiciness. So you have a ball collide, you have explosions. Like, it shows that you did this thing. It shows that you made these balls collide. Whereas if the balls don't collide, then you don't get that. But every time you send a ball off, maybe there's a clack, like a little snooker cue. You get this feedback, you get this audio. Maybe there's even a little flash to show, hey, there was an impact as the ball goes off along its path. We want to have some reaction. That's why, in the end, we're not just writing our own book. We want to have a little bit of the work done for us. So, Harley, for this, do you have any thoughts? Harley, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, it could be interesting to have a game book that's just a fight, just one fight. It's like, do you punch with your left or your right hand? Do you kick? What kind of kick do you do? But it's a tricky one, because I would want to say, you know, does the reader feel satisfied at the end of the section that they just read? But that's going to depend on the reader. You can't write a one-size-fits-all anything, because not everybody is going to like it or enjoy every choice that they made. Like, you know, I might write, do you pick the fruit? You know, someone might pick the fruit and be like, yeah, this is great. And someone might pick the fruit and be like, oh, this is, okay, great. What a useless section. It's a really tricky one.
Mm.
It's only
and the concept of imbuing things with some, it's not really about the length of the section, maybe. It's more about the narrative impact. But if we were to say, okay, what's an appropriate length? If we were to make the question easier, I would say, assuming just words and no images, I'm going to say an appropriate length as a minimum is 4 lines.
4 lines, okay. Okay.
What were you about to say?
I was going to be like 500 words. Like,
500 words for a section, for a minimum length.
I don't know, Bez. I don't know. You asked me my gut instinct. I told you.
I like it. Okay, so Harley likes a lot of writing. Surprise there.
I'm going to say 1 word is enough in some circumstances.
Yeah, okay.
1 word can have a lot of meaning, and you can just 1 word is surely enough to base a choice around sometimes.
But then if you've done the work of turning to a page and then there's only 1 word, doesn't that feel a bit...
I don't think every choice has to be meaningful anyway. There's some of the choices in the book has to be meaningful, but not every single choice has to be. Some, you could have a meaningless choice, go left, go right, with no information about what that means. and that's just provides a different path through the narrative. So that's more of it doesn't have meaning for the reader, but it will lead to a different path in the narrative. It could be a completely different experience based on that choice. So there is meaning behind it, but it's the author who's given the meaning. So I don't think every choice has to be meaningful. I think...
Yeah, Bez.
You
Who needs my
when
gamebook prescription?
You mentioned when you were doing your Warlock of Firetop Mountain read-through that some of the choices there were meaningless. And I think the problem is if too many of the choices seem meaningless, then it can be frustrating for the reader. You need to feel that some of your decisions make a difference and that you've got some information to base your decisions on.
Yeah, so catching up with the chat, Maya wanted to talk about Passage, which I've not personally played, but is a video game that was meant to be 0 choices within that. I've not played that. I can't comment on that. Yeah, I can't comment on Passage specifically, but within a game book, I mean, could you have a game book? I would still argue no. And I'm basically with Rob. You need to feel like, for me, do you feel like you have any agency? To me, a game, you have to feel like you have an impact on it. River Dusty says there's this vague thing called a beginning, middle, and an end. Maya says the choice does need to exist, but does not have to be obvious. But if you've got a choice of, okay, do I pause in real life? Do I pause at the end of this chapter? Or do I, again, that's just a book, it seems to me. Maybe and the game would tell you to press key right, and if you did that, you would just die. However, if you would disagree with the rule telling you where to go, you would have a life. Or the Monkey Island approach, depending on your physical ability or your ability to insult your opponent. And imagine a game book where every 10th page says, skip 10 pages. Would you cheat? I mean, again, this gets into the notion of what is a game, because to me, a game, you have to voluntarily agree to the rules that are set out. And if the game is kind of wanting you to read it, then at that point, to me, it's not a game. It's more of a toy or a puzzle, because you're having to determine the rules yourself. To me, the key thing about a game is that the rules are set out for you. I mean, we're getting into a linguistic thing. But yeah, I guess for me, it would depend how entertaining it was. If it was entertaining enough that every 10 pages I skipped 10 pages, I'd probably follow that at least the first time. And then I'd be like, wait a minute. If maybe along the way the narrative says, skip 10 pages, are you going to do this? And then it starts becoming a bit more self-aware. Do you have any thoughts on anything that's been said, Scott, Harley?
If every 10th page said skip 10 pages, surely you would skip 10 pages and the next page would then just say skip 10 pages, because that would be the 10th page, and then you would just skip all the way to the end.
No, because you get to page 10, and then it says skip 10 pages, and then you go to page 21. Okay.
All right. You can have this one.
Okay.
Eventually you'll get back on... Okay. Fine. Very well.
Because a game book's 2 different things, it's a game and it's a narrative. So it sort of depends on where it falls on the spectrum. If it's more of a game with mechanics like combat or skill checks, you could have shorter, less text in each section. I mean, section could be, you start a fight with this monster, it has skill 7 and stamina 10. If you win, go to this section. If you lose, go to that. And that's a very valid section. If it's more of a narrative with no rules at all, except at the bottom of the section you follow the choice, then you probably want longer sections.
Sorry, I can hear my washing machine beeping at me. I'm going to be right back.
Okay, and I am going to say, for me, I think yes. To answer Alex's surprise question, would it be a game book if you had a lot of character creation and then you had a big section after that where it said, okay, if you have this much stats, turn to this page, and you didn't have any choices in the middle, but the choices were all front-loaded in that way? Because I feel like even though I might feel a lack of agency, but I definitely would feel like, okay, I've made these choices, and okay, next time I read it, I guess this would be a game book where it's all about the repeated playing, because next time you play it, you're like, okay, instead of this thing, I'll choose the other attributes and see where that takes me. But I think that would be really interesting. And yeah, for sure, there's a lot of stuff around the line of what's possible. And Rob mentioned something where if you actually listen to the game book, you just get the instructions to keep skipping. So maybe the section just says skip 10 pages, and then every 11th page says skip 10 pages, and that's all it says on that page. That would be certainly interesting. I could see something, but yeah, let's go to something more regular, let's say. What do you think is generally within game books an appropriate number of choices per section? There are some game books where you just go to something and then you only have one choice. Some parts of Warlock of Firetop Mountain, you get 0 choices, and you actually have to make a note of, well, I guess the final section where you die, that's 0 choices, you don't continue at all. But I was thinking also of the points where it says make a note of this chapter and then go there and then have this encounter and then come back here. And yeah, is that appropriate? Does that take away from the agency of the player? Can we talk about the impact of those, the number of choices? Does that give the player more agency intrinsically, Scott?
I think it's, again, you can't look at the individual section, it's the game book as a whole. So if the whole game book was a number of sections with no choice, you just go to section 21, then you go to section 42, then it's just a narrative. It's just a novel, really. It's not a game. But as long as
some annoying page turning thrown in the middle.
Which is, could be an interesting exercise anyway.
A narrative put through a blender first.
Yes. As long as there's some choices and there's some different paths through, then you've got a game, I think. So it depends how many sections you've got and what you want to achieve. But if you've got too many choices, it's also very difficult to create. If you have 10 choices at every section, and each section leads to another 10 choices, in theory, after 2 sections, you've got 100 different outcomes.
And that brings us to, do you bring things back together or do you keep branching? I talked about Pretty Little Mistakes, which is literally just branch after branch after branch, where I think one of the selling points is over 150 endings, and all of these endings are actually really valid endings. Are you living the end of your life? Some of them are, sadly, you die before your time. A lot of them are you're dying at an old age. Some of them you've got a lover. Some of them you're on your own. Some of them you've got multiple lovers. Some of them, it's all sorts of things, and there's many different varieties. But if you want, that's an extreme example of giving the player almost maximum agency, where I am never going to bring these things back together. You can make these choices, and any choice that you make will always matter. It'll never collapse back in. And yeah, Nicholas, I would 100% agree. Having regular choices is definitely a very valuable implicit element of most game books. Harley, do you think that the number of choices directly impacts the agency that a player feels?
I mean, I think we're then again getting into the territory of is a book with one choice a game book? We're sort of going back to what we were saying a little bit earlier. I think that
I'm going to put my neck out and say no.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. But then once again, we're talking what's the most number of choices to put in a game book. So is a 1,000-page novel with 10 choices, is that still a game book?
I feel like
yeah, they're difficult questions, aren't they, Bez?
Sorry, say that second question again.
Is a 1,000-page novel with 10 choices still a game book?
How many choices do you get? So how many section explains that? So how many sections is it? 1,000. So
1,000 pages. So you've got 10 choices. You start at choice one.
If you've got 10 choices, then presumably there's more than 10 sections. Like if there's 10 choices, then maybe it's 10 to the power of, or 2 to the power of 9 sections. If you had 3 choices each time, it could be 3 to the power of 9 sections, which would be 927. I'm not 90-ish, 100. I don't know what's 3 to the power of 9. Someone else tell me. And then, those pages could actually be quite short.
But what I'm saying is, you've got a book and you've got choice number 1, and then you can go 2 or 3, and then those can go 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Are those 10? Does
Okay,
that
so you've
count?
got 2 choices and 10 sections.
Yeah. So does that still count? Is that what? How does one define a game book? When does a book become a game book? I'm just going to slowly put on more blankets throughout this stream as well. Sorry, I'm very cold.
And Alex says, so is going to the library a game book? The choice being which?
Going to the library is an experience.
Oh, and honestly, like, these conversations are as much about these vague philosophical questions as I am here for that. I was thinking about starting with 1 choice, too little probably, 2 choices, the fundamental choice being at the beginning and reading the book as a choice. It's different than giving the 1 choice just at the cusp of the climax would be different. Deciding the ultimate fate of the story. I could imagine a 1,000-page book. I can't imagine it really working with 10 sections and 2 choices. But with a 100-page book, where each section is 10 pages, let's assume it's, fairly large print and like Alba, let's assume that kind of word counts per page. Yeah, sure. 10 pages per section, and then having 2 choices. I could imagine like a short novella, essentially, where you're going to be reading about 30 pages of it. It's a short story, but you've decided how you've had a beginning choice, and that goes. And I guess that's what River Dusty was saying at the start. You've got the beginning, middle, and end. And then you've got some ownership of the middle, and then you've got some ownership of the end. Maybe that is it. Maybe, yeah, maybe that is what you need. So, 2, 4. So maybe you need 6 sections? Is the minimum number for a game book, I'm going to say now? It would feel very much like a game book novella. But Alex and Rob, are saying, yeah, the what's a game book is similar in utility to the what's a game discussion. And I want to say let's assume we are not trying to push the boundaries of what's possible. Let's assume that, sure, we might be trying to do something fresh and new, like an open world adventure book, but let's be honest, Alba was never meant to be what's the most extreme blah that we can do.
Yeah.
I mean, Peter could have commissioned something far more extreme if Peter was wanting to do this. I mean, if you want to say, like, this is an example in what's the most extreme blah I can do, like what's the longest name that I can get in a game. And at that point, it becomes kind of, pointless as a name, where Crystal Dax read it out loud, and I think it took Crystal about 10 minutes. And I think only 3 people in the world have actually read the entire thing out loud, to my knowledge, but again, if someone wants to make a game book with 7 sections or 6 sections, I am all for it. If you want to make a game book with long things, or a game book where you have to actually subvert the expectations, and these are interesting design, inspirations for sure. Maybe we've given someone something to think about. I might write a short novella, like a Jabberwocky thing someday, if I feel like it. And, maybe I want to get some... This is a thing that makes me want to go affiliates, because no one looks at the shop for my stream elements points, which makes me kind of sad, because it's kind of a bit more work. But anyway, I wanted to do a stream with people making choices about me. Anyway.
Yes, be the protagonist. The best book.
The point, coming into it from the philosophical side and not the engineering side, asking this kind of question serves well when exploring the concepts, their reach and their limits. It's an opportunity to interrogate the subject, says Nicholas. I do kind of agree, and I think it's nice to imagine what could the limits be, but then I also think it's useful to come back to the center and say, okay, let's assume we are making a game book where we want to tell a story, and this is not a micro game book. This is a typical thing of between 48 pages and 1,000 pages, somewhere between that. I know that's a big range, but let's just cut out those extremes. I'm even willing to say 24 pages to 1,000 pages, but let's kind of within that, and then you need to have some element of, this is the story that I'm wanting to tell. There's some element of authorial intent. You can't tell every single story. You can, and yeah, Nicholas, I agree. I'm just kind of trying to rein it. Anyway, but there should be some element of players get choice. Is there a reasonable minimum and maximum that we can agree on of number of choices per section? Like, I would agree with you, Scott, that if you had 10 for a normal game book, I would say an average, firstly, length of section. What feels gut reaction like an appropriate average? Scott.
If we think about what most people reading a game book want out of it, what they regard as a game book, what they enjoy, then which is a more useful definition, I think. What is a game book is what people feel or think is a game book. I think it needs to be, say, minimum of 50 sections to feel like a sort of game book. And you've got to have, if you have at least 2 choices per section, I think it's going to feel like a valid game. But I think 10 choices is a lot. You can do that occasionally, maybe in a longer book, but it becomes a bit. Normally you have a lot of choices if you're coming back to that section, so then you can explore each of the choices in sequence. So that's something you might want to do, but generally I think 2 to 4 choices per section is normal, is typical, is what people are happy with. If you have 10 choices and you don't go back to them, you always just take one choice, and people are going to feel a bit dissatisfied. They'll cheat. They'll go back to that section to explore the other options.
I mean, I'm actually thinking of the river section in Warlock of Firetop Mountain, where I think you can ring the bell, you can steal the boat, you can swim across, or you can take the bridge. And that's only 4 choices. I might be forgetting something, but I actually brought it down to London. I could flick through until I find the section. But Scott, am I correct in remembering that it was just 4 choices for that section?
Sounds about right, yeah.
That was a section that you came back to. And, you swim across, maybe you come back, and you can't make it all the way across. You take the bridge, and maybe the bridge collapses. And it definitely felt, whoa, 4 choices. This is quite exciting. So I am going to say that, to me, this is gut reaction. The ideal number of choices in a game book is 2.7.
Okay, good, yeah.
Yeah. Harley,
Yeah.
do you think
so
it's 2.6?
Yeah, and it's terrible. I think in the hamlet of choices that we have, I think it's done. We don't need to have any more conversations about game books. Best solved it. Best solved game books. I think 3 is a good choice. I think 3 is a good number. I think the most in Alba was about 6 on one section, but that was one section where you had it. I think that 3 or 4 as a max is probably a good amount of choices, because otherwise you are always just left sort of wondering, but what if I picked one of the other many choices there were? Whereas I feel it is a lot easier to be decisive when there's less choices to choose from.
I mean, in all seriousness, with Alba, when you think about, end of chapter, go wherever you've already found, if we consider those choices, that can explode quite a bit. I think there might have been one point where I had more than 10 choices for sure. And I think at that point it was generally, okay, one of these choices just means that I go to the next page. So I'm going to pick that one. Because
fair enough.
Convenience.
Yeah, whatever.
And unfortunately, that meant that I hope I gave this feedback to Peter. I don't know if it's too late to change. I felt like, I can't remember what the ship was called. The ship where there's the people and, but like ship 1 and ship 2, I feel should be separated, because if you just want to go to the next bit, then you don't go to ship 2 and go straight back. Oh, you turn away. Oh, you come back.
And then you turn back, yeah. Hi, guys, I'm back. And they're like, oh, great. Okay, you're here.
But for sure, I'm going to admit that, yes, I agree with Scott. Once it was more than 5, I think more than 5 for me was a bit too many. Not that I was feeling unhappy about it, but beyond that, it just felt like it didn't matter anymore. It didn't feel like I was able to properly consider these choices, because it's not just about the sheer number of choices, but also how different they feel. And that's the thing that we need to ask about. Like, how can we make sure that these choices actually feel valid? Do you know what I mean? Do you have any tips, Scott? How can we make sure that these choices feel like valid things, and then when we get to the end, we are like, yes, we made that choice, and that's impacted the thing, and it had this repercussion. That's what I want from a game book, because I think that is what people want from a game book, if we broadly agree with that, as a general statement.
I think that there are 2 aspects to the choice. One is what are you basing your decision on? What sort of information is input? And the other is the output. What is the effect of the choice, which you only find out after you've taken it and gone to the new page, or even later in the game book. Sometimes you might take a choice early on and it only has an impact right at the end of the game book. But I think in terms of the experience, it's more about having meaningful choices. So you have enough information to feel that you can make a decision not based on just randomness. So you need the information either in the paragraph, in the description. There needs to be enough information there for you to make a meaningful choice, or it should be inherently meaningful. Like, you go to a market, do you buy an apple or do you buy a pair of scissors? You know just from those words that you're going to get a very different outcome. If you buy an apple, what are you going to do with it? You're going to eat it, you're going to bake a pie. If you buy a pair of scissors, are you going to cut your piece of paper into shapes, or are you going to stab somebody? So you know just from what, simple piece of information, scissors or apple, you're going to have different sets of choices going forward.
Yeah. Maybe that's also something that goes, and I guess this is about piggybacking on the meaning of those words and choosing words that inherently feel different. And so it's about, does the player understand a difference between these choices? Because if my choice is run away or scarper, what does that even mean? I mean, to me right now, those seem like synonyms. I don't know if they have inherently different meanings to you, but maybe in the author's mind, okay, run away, it means that you go away, and scarper means that you turn around a corner, but you still look back. But that's not at all clear from that. Yeah, and so Harley, anything to say about this?
No, I think that Scott summed it up quite nicely. What I always try to do is that by the end of a section, either you will have sort of completed the task and done it well, sort of, the ideal outcome, or you'll sort of get an item, or you'll adjust a stat or something like that, so that it sort of feels like hopefully no matter what the reader chose, they won't feel like it was just a pointless decision. But obviously you can't have that for every single decision, otherwise the amount of things you would need to put on your character sheet would be sort of, you'd have to unscroll the character sheet and it would sort of fall along the floor in order to keep track of all those choices.
I like the notion of saying that something needs to change for each section, as in, you make the choice, you have an understanding of what might change, and sometimes those expectations have to be met. I think that is the notion of, ultimately, if we want ultimate agency, it's an abstract strategy game where we make a choice and exactly what we anticipated happens, and then, but then even in there's the chaos of the other player. I guess, is there a feeling of more agency in a puzzle? And I would personally say no. I mean, I personally feel more agency in a game of Go than I would feel in solving someone's puzzle, but that's just me. But you definitely need some sorts of, okay, this is what's going to happen, and my expectations have been met. But at the same time, you need some surprises, because it is a narrative, because it is an experience, because we need surprises in our experiences. If I throw a punch at someone, and I apologize for all the violence today with the scissor stabbing and the punching, but yeah, if I go to tickle someone, then maybe they laugh, maybe they're ticklish, maybe they're not ticklish. If I try to steal something, or if I go to punch someone, maybe it connects, maybe they block me, maybe I've got some indication of what kind of monster it is, what kind of person it is I'm dealing with. Maybe I'm trying to punch some innocent person. Maybe my character is incredibly cruel in this game book, I don't know. And, they're defenseless. And but maybe they're actually, I'm trying to be a vigilante, maybe I'm trying to take down a criminal, and maybe I end up getting beaten up and even tied up, and terrible things start happening. But yeah, you need this mixture of uncertainty and expectations to be met. I guess it goes back to the old communications theory of surprise and completion. Would you agree? Hey, the last question that I had, and then if we've got any more questions or any more chats, then we can go on about that. But the last question that I actually had written was, how much of a game book should be left unread in a single sitting? Broad question. This is the question for which there's no, and I'm going to say more than half, for sure.
Depends on the length of the book. Sorry.
Yeah, but if it's a short book, don't you still want to have to play it a good few times to? If you only have to play it twice to see the entire thing, then it doesn't really feel like a game book to me.
No, I really do think it depends on the length. If it's really short, then if you're going to play it multiple times, you're going to be repeating yourself a lot. If it's a very long book, you could play it 10 times and never experience the same section twice. If it's an average game book, 400 sections, I think you want to, it depends how many times you want to play it. I think most people would like to play through a book 3, 4, 5 times at least, but probably not, they're not going to play it 20 times. So you need to think about, how many times would a typical player want to play this book? If they're going to play it 4 or 5 times, you don't want them to read through more than half of it in the first playthrough.
And so are we agreed that, I don't know if either of you have bought or read through Pretty Little Mistakes, because when you say, I don't think most people would want to read it 20 times, Pretty Little Mistakes, that is, designed so that, yes, you do go back and then you read through it. So it's designed that you skim read bits on your subsequent sittings, and maybe you play and see 20 endings in one sitting, because frankly, one read through is about 10 minutes. And I feel like I'd like someone else to do something like that again. I don't know. What do you think, Harley?
Well, it's like when I was reading Goosebumps, I sort of sat down sort of after lunchtime and I went, I'm going to read this, and I've not picked it up since. But then again, a Goosebumps book is not the same as a fighting fantasy book, There's a level of difference there between the amount of content and the heaviness of the content, I would say. So I think with something like that, or when the original Choose Your Own Adventures, which are about yay big, I think there's nothing wrong with sitting down and having it all in one session and sort of having that whole experience. But for something bigger, like Pretty Little Mistakes, if you're going to read that all in one session, that's probably going to take you, a period of over 24 hours, which seems a little bit wild. So I think it can be nice, especially if it's something you're not planning on going back to right away, to read a playthrough and maybe sort of keep a note of what you did, and then come back to it later and be like, okay, so remember what I did last time, so this time I'm going to try and make different decisions, and I'll sort of chip away at it.
I mean, do you think can be satisfying for a game book if we were to play through once and actually see more than half of it?
I think
I don't mean like play through once as in one sitting. I mean front to end. Like, I've definitely seen 100% of a book in a single sitting, because it was like a little 16-page thing, which still felt to me like a proper game book. Admittedly a very short one, but in a single read through, Harley, you were about to say.
Yeah, I think it would be, once again, that's coming down to the number of choices in it, isn't it? Because if there's only 9 choices and you pick 5 of them, then you've probably read more than half. But with something longer, like Alba, you're not going to. I would, unless you're purposefully going on a longer journey, I would doubt that you would see more than half of the book in one sitting. But yeah, it's, I don't know, maybe you've stumped me with this one. I'm going to be honest with you.
That's totally fair. Maya has a very definite yes. That could be
Yes.
enjoyed. And by
Maya
the way,
coming and sorting it out.
longest reading through a single game book playthrough was 8 or even maybe 12 hours for Maya. Scott, what's your thoughts on?
I mean, personally, if it's quite a narrative game book with long sections, I don't want to have to reread those sections many times. So what I tend to do with some books, I'll play through it once. When I play through again, if it's a section I've already read, I'll just skip to the end. So then you're just going from looking at the choices at the bottom, just going through those, and when you come to a section you haven't read before, then you read it. So that's slightly unsatisfying for me. But if it's more of a fighting fantasy with lots of combats, for example, then you could replay those many times and get different outcomes. I mean, I don't personally like the combats very much, but if there's more of a game mechanics within each section, then you can replay them many times, and that'll still be interesting and fresh.
Yeah, it feels like I'm going to wrap it up at this point, and if you've got any final words that you would like to share with how we can bring more agency and more of a feeling of ownership of narrative to the players and make them more invested, because it's not just about the obvious things that I've said. And hello, Jeroen, it's lovely to see you. You're here just as I'm starting to wrap up. But we talked about, books that were things we've been reading recently: Keyforge Rules, Solar War, Highway Code, exciting. We talked about words and the connotations that words have, whether they're from different languages. What did you say? Egesh, Egedi?
Egesh Egedre.
Egesh, Egedre, or Torofi. We talked about, it's about the structure and the agency. It's about the balance between wanting to impose some sort of structure to say, hey, when you read this, when you play this, this is the experience you will get. Because you can't have every possible kind of experience. Like when you're playing, Warlock of Firetop Mountain, it is a kind of old school. I think that Ian Livingstone did actually do a good job of trying to capture a role-playing game in a book. I think that was, it does feel like an old school hack and slash role-playing game. Conversely, if you have a game like Pretty Little Mistakes, which is kind of a coming of age thing, this is about life. These are short stories about, this is an exploration about what it means to be human, what it means to be someone who's becoming a woman, to be, the dangers out in the world, the possibilities out in the world. That's what that story's about. Conversely, you might have a book that's, a silly romp about, a character trying to solve an argument, and it's just a very short comic, or a time-traveling thing involving getting ice cream, or in the case of Alba, exploring a world and meeting things and seeing what's out there. And part of that is the surprise, and in a sense the lack of agency, I guess, is part of that book, because in a game that's all about exploration and it's all about the unknown, in a sense, you want to have maybe more surprise and lower agency. In a sense, I don't know if you agree with me. We talks about, metaphor and vagarity of meaning in songs and poems, and the line between communication and emotional expression. We talked about 2.7 choices, or Scott said 2 to 10 and Harley said 3 is an appropriate number of choices to have per section. We talked about, on the one side, it's what do you have going in, the knowledge that you have, understanding the possible paths. On the other side, once that's happened, it needs to have some sort of impact. And maybe not every single thing has to have impact. Individual sections within the game can buck the trend. Individual sections can, give you too much impact. That was a surprise, that sudden death, or does something alarming to your character. I guess this is also about how much respect you treat death with, because if it's just you die, that's it, then it's like, well, what am I going to do with that? I'm going to turn back. But if it's like you start to sink into the abyss, you sink into depression, and you find yourself unable to peel your body off the floor as you gaze all around you, do you try to crawl over to get yourself a cup of tea? Or do you... Sorry, I'm not going to get too dark. And, if that continues for another few pages, it might have been... Then at least that's engrossing. It feels like there's some payoff. It's not just about... And it feels like the choice mattered, even though it might not be the character's life that they most lived. Talking about the notion of, is this a failure to do something, or is it just, hey, your character went mad? And it doesn't mean that you made wrong choices, but it's, a valid thing. It's what happens. And yeah. Do we have anything more to say about all of this stuff? Scott?
I've got a game book recommendation.
Okay.
Just because the last one I finished, it's one of the graphic novel game books, Space Unit. Unfortunately, it's only available in French at the moment, but they'd probably translate it to English at some point. And I just love the illustrations in this. So you're not a single character. Actually, I think you're this character. So you're sort of... This character's like a leader of a group, so you represent a team of adventurers, let's say, investigating a space station. And in this, some of these sections, you get very little text because obviously the illustrations tell you a lot. And what I love about these books is sometimes the choices are hidden. Like you can see there's some numbers there, you go into different areas, but sometimes the numbers are really small. So you might read through quickly, you might not see them, or another time you play it, you see one of these little references and find, oh, you found, I don't know, a laser gun lying on the floor or something like that.
That's it.
And one of the great things about this is there's an alien race who are your enemies, but over the course of the book, you can actually become allies with one of them. So he becomes part of your team, or he or she, I'm not quite sure which.
Or they.
I don't want to say too much because there are a few spoilers there, but...
And yeah, potentially maybe they'll say, this joke was actually funny in its original language. Harley, do you have anything more to say about this subject, or anything else? And do either of you, so Scott, if you can think about this, have any tips for imbuing game books with with agency and involvement? Because that's what it's all about. Agency, but also involvement, about caring. because we want to care, but it's a level of caring beyond just I'm reading through.
Yeah, I think the most important thing there is meaningful choices. The idea that you do something that will impact something, that feels like you've done something that is going to have an effect on the world.
Yeah. I guess that's what, yeah, as we say, one way to define a good game. And stream elements, I'll just kind of stretch side to side. I'm going to disobey you. I'm stretching however I want to stretch. Damn you, stream elements. I'm not going back and forth at all. But yeah, if no one else has anything else to say for now, this has been a lovely discussion. And thank you very much for joining me. I have been Bez, stuffbybez.com, stuffbybez.bigcards.com. On Twitter, I am stuffbybez, instagram.com/stuffbez, twitch.tv/stuffbybez, where you're probably watching. And I'm streaming 10 a.m. UK time every day for the next 38 days, youtube.com/stuffbez, and please join my Discord. And if you want to check out Scott is possible to be found on the place known as the internet. So,
or
Scott,
in the village of Birmingham. Come to the village of Birmingham.
Birminghamlet.
Okay, so if you've got any particular, if you want, you are Scott Hammer or This War Without an Enemy on Facebook is your thing. And Harley.
Meet me in the village green. Every day I go to the village green, so you can always find me there.
Harley, you're on Twitter as H_Truslove, and the Kickstarter has finished, but I believe that people can still buy it if they wish to.
Yeah. I don't know the ins and outs of Kickstarter, but if you go and have a look, I think there's ways to purchase it. Come and have a look.
Yeah, go check it out. It is good. I read it. I enjoyed it. Thank you, Erin, for those kind, lovely words. Thank you, Nicholas. And this brings me to once again, thank you, everyone, not only Harley and Scott, but also everyone who's been watching, all you commentators, all you question askers, all you lurkers, all you workers, all you people who are just generally lovely, and all the moderators, shout out to them. And
you Hamlet dwellers.
If there's anything you wish to say or share, then now is your opportunity, because just at the end I like to say, over to you, what are you up to? You can share, but only if you want to. What are you up to after this stream? Do you have anything you're actually looking forward to? Monday, I decided Mondays are going to be my day off. And so I'm going to do a tiny bits of stuff, but like I'm going to try and stay away from social media or writing things or sending emails or anything as of 12:30. And then I don't know what I'll do. Maybe I'll do some reading. Maybe I'll read some things. I don't know. Maybe I'll have a wee wander. But I'm going to enjoy a day off.
Good.
How about you, Scott?
I was going to have a walk around the village, but it's raining, so maybe not.
Harley?
I'm much like last time. I'm going to go make myself an omelette, and then I think I might go and play Harry Potter, the PS1 game, controversially, which I bought off eBay a few days ago, and going to go and sort of polygon my way around Hogwarts. You
know what? Even though I implied I might be staying away from the computer, I might play video games today.
That's okay. That's allowed. I'll give you permission.
And I've decided I am going to go and have instant noodles after this for breakfast / lunch.
So, crunch.
Yes, we've had some people in the comments. Erin says, I'm going to write a 1,000 word game book. 1,000 words. with
Go
negative
away, Erin.
consequences. It's a
Stop being
fatal
horrible wet
exercise.
mushroom.
I am making animals to incorporate in a game. It was fun at first, now it's tweaking, so less fun, but I guess exciting. That sounds... Yeah, are you as in making up animals? Like as in wee whimsical creatures? Because if you need wee whimsical creatures... You know, this is where, if only I had my deck of wee whimsical creatures with me, because you could even like put them, that could be another use for my deck of wee whimsical creatures, maybe coming to Kickstarter once I've finished up Categorical and once I'm allowing myself to work on other things. And not reigning in our mega city of Wantage, so we're planning to cook pizza in the oven. 3 parts connect to an animal, that sounds fun. Rob's working on a Pirates game. Okay, so apparently we've got 10 of each part, 1,000 options. Okay, so I see it's one of those sorts of things, like where you stitch animals together. That sounds fun. And still working on a game. Well, I wish you all luck with and enjoyment and satisfaction with whatever you're up to. If you are interested in my future streams, if you've enjoyed this, you would almost certainly enjoy tomorrow, which is about discussing pitching. So Rita, Alan, Paul, Matthew Dunstan, and myself will be chatting about pitching board games to publishers. That's at 10 a.m. tomorrow. In the evening, I am going to be playing a couple of very quick, simple word games, Nanomuckle and then Micromuckle. I usually do one of them twice and the other one once. Depends how we're feeling on the day, whether we feel like a bit more of the shorter side and a bit more conversation, or a bit more of the longer game and a bit less conversation. But we'll see how it goes.
A little less conversation, a little more word game.
Wednesday, I'm meeting up with Jenham, who is a lovely musician. Thursday, discussing translation. Friday is a Friendly Friday forum. Also, I've decided that I'm going to talk about pronouns for at least 20 minutes. So if you want to be part of that chat and explain, I've explained it in individual streams, but basically the fact that I've chosen to, let me get rid of this, how I have all the pronouns that someone feels comfortable having applied to them in order of preference, because I feel that that's more useful and it's got more utility value than just conjugating things. Because let's say someone is happy with all 3, someone feels like a she or a they or a he, then that doesn't apply to the, guess I need to put they, them, but you know, with it's more of an expression of self, I feel. And I feel like maybe it's just because I would be interested to discuss this approach and discuss whether some more people should be doing that. But yeah, share, spread the word. If any of those streams sounds interesting, on the weekend I'm meeting up with Dutch Yoda. On Sunday I'm playing something, and next Monday I'm having Uli from Spielworks, and we're going to be chatting about publishing, and so that's going to be exciting. But that's the end of the show. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll have to catch up on tomorrow's stream afterwards. Yeah, I mean, hopefully it's useful. I'm putting them also into their own wee thing on my YouTube. And that's why I started using he/they instead of he, him, they, them, which would be much longer. Yeah, people know how to conjugate he and they, right? I mean, if you want to have neopronouns, I understand the need to explain how neopronouns are conjugated. Anyway, but
I think it's just for... Okay, do you know what? I won't go into it. Well, that's a different stream.
No, if you want to talk about it for literally 2 minutes, then if you can keep it to 2 minutes, do it right now.
Well, I literally think it's just for people who want to put it in like bios, like Twitter. So it's not just writing they at the end of a sentence. I think it's just easy to just put they, them, just so that people definitely know what you're going on about, rather than putting that my pronouns are they.
I think the reason it started with they, them, he, her, he, him, she, her. I say everyone knows how to conjugate things. I didn't mean that. Anyway, but I think that the reason it started is because of things like sie, zer, and or it might be Z, them, I don't know. And that's the thing with neopronouns, where people are making up these words for first person singular or whatever. You need to explain how these neopronouns are used. But then also I would say that, yeah, I think that's why it started. But then having just they in brackets, and that's shorter on Twitter as well. If you want to put they, I think, yeah, I'm going. You know what? So I'm going to put that in my Twitter bio. I'm going to put open brackets she. I'm going to change it right after this thing. I can't remember what it says on my Twitter bio. Yeah, it says she, her. So I'm going to change that to put just she, because people know what that means. Wait, I pressed the space rather than. Okay, so there we go. She. That's my preferred pronoun. And I don't see any need to conjugate it. And that's now less excuse for other people to not do it, because that's what we ideally want. Everyone to be doing it, because not just taking things for granted. Anyway, but yeah, Harley, if you have time on Friday, it would be lovely to have you. Everyone on Friday, as long as you're respectful, is welcome to come on the stream. I understand typing might be difficult for some people, and it's easier to just speak and get your words out. So I do genuinely welcome on Fridays explicitly. Anyone can join in, as long as you have a... I am going to say, for that topic, even if you don't have a camera, if I know who you are, you can come on. I would prefer if you do have a camera, but as long as you have a microphone, as long as you have a working web browser, you will be able to make it work. Anyway, Ewan says, to be honest, I still mix and mess up, not on purpose, but it's still also new to me. And that's totally okay. Like, if people mess up sometimes, that is okay. But we'll talk about it all on, Friday. But, yeah, sorry, you can see the energy and the dissatisfaction and probably unhappiness at having been... Anyway, yeah. Will you join me on Friday, Harley?
I'll try. I'll do my best. I'll make a little note.
It would be lovely to have you. Anyway, I do apologise for starting off on the rant. Thank you once more to everyone. You are all lovely. I love you too, Jeroen. I have a lot of love for everyone who's been here. You all seem like lots of wonderful people. And who am I going to raid? I am going to raid... Oh, Idol Michael is streaming every day now. Of course they are. The first annual Eurovision evaluation, or we've got Harry Mur games, Unity tutorials. Let's go. Let's start off the week with raiding Idol Michael, and feel free to copy paste some or all of that raid message, and that is the end of the stream. Does anyone have anything that they feel the burning needs to say?
I said the highway code wasn't a choose your own adventure book, but sometimes it will say, see how roundabouts work on section 178. So, maybe you could keep reading, maybe you go to section 178, the world's most dull choose your own adventure book.
Did you feel any agency?
No, not in the book, but maybe on the roundabout I will.
Hopefully you'll understand that you are in power of that car. I would hope so when you're driving. Scott, any final words?
No, thanks as always, Bez. This was great fun. Thanks, Harley.
Thanks, Scott. Nice to see you.
And thanks everyone who's contributed.
Well, for now, that's the end. So, bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now It's time to go. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye, Alex. Bye-bye,
the
Rob.
anticipation.
Bye-bye, Nicholas. Bye-bye, Arun. Bye-bye, Erin. Bye-bye, Harley. Bye-bye, Scott. Bye-bye, Maya. Thank you for joining. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Yeah, that's the end. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye again, Alex. Bye-bye. I wish you all agency in your day. Bye-bye, Harley.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Scott. Bye-bye, Rob. Turn to 400. Okay. That's the end.